authentic and natural English.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Second Nature English. Our task, what we're going to be learning this week, is related to the category of rules. You will be able to learn a lot more from this topic with the course Storytelling with Verb Tenses, but without further ado, let's get started with the exercise that we have for today. Now, we have here 5 sentences. These 5 sentences are talking about 2 actions. We also have people that we're talking about. And then at the end, we have one question that asks about one of the, just for us to choose one person from this list. Now, more specifically here, we're talking about the difference of use when we use past perfect. And I will be talking about the rules a little bit once we are finished with the exercise, but let's take a look at the sentences now. So the first one that we have is Jane left when Tim arrived. The second, Bob left when Tim had arrived. Third, Tim arrived when Mary was leaving. Then we have John had left when Tim arrived. Now the final sentence is, after Tim arrived, Frank left. So we have these 5 sentences. I'm going to read them one more time. First one is, Jane left when Tim arrived. Second, Bob left when Tim had arrived. Third, Tim arrived when Mary was leaving. Fourth, John had left when Tim arrived. Fifth, after Tim arrived, Frank left. Now the question here is, who did not run into Tim? Now, who did not run into Tim? Now, if you're familiar with phrasal verbs, you will understand the meaning of run into. If you're not familiar, to run into means to meet someone unexpectedly. So it's almost like you're walking on the street, you see that person, there was no plan for you to meet, so you meet unexpectedly. You can say that you run into another person, or so just like cross paths. Now, in this particular case, we have 2 clauses, right? We have 2 ideas there, one subject and a verb, and then we have some words that help us make the relationship of time. In this case, we have a lot of whens. We also have when, and we also have after there for the last one. And then in the midst of that, we also have the verb tenses that we are using. So we have left, arrived, left, had arrived, arrived, was leaving, had left, arrived, left. So here we have a combination of past simple, past perfect, and past continuous as well. So all of these in the past. Now imagine a party. Tim arrives at the party. Okay, so Tim arrives at the party. Now, who does Tim see? So if I have here, Jane left when Tim arrived. So this indicates to me that the action of Jane leaving happens after Tim arrived. So what I can conclude in this case is that Jane did see Tim. So they ran into each other because Jane only left after the fact of Tim arrived. So Jane left when Tim arrived, so they did run into each other. Now, taking a look there at Bob and Tim. So Bob left when Tim had arrived. So in this particular case here, we are using one in the past simple and the other one in the past perfect. This is the biggest moment here when we think about more advanced levels of grammar. In this particular case, when we use past perfect, we indicate which action chronologically finished first. So we have the duration of the day that starts from midnight and goes to like midnight 01 until 11:59 p.m. the other day, right? We have this idea that time goes in a continuum and there's some chronology to it. So if something happens at 7 a.m., something else happens at 9 a.m., and right now it's 11 p.m., we consider that what happened at 7 is more in the past than the action that happened at 9. But when we think about this, we do have some sense of chronology of one action that happened first, one action that happened after. Now, when we want to indicate the action that happened first or that finished first in our chronology, we need to use what we call past perfect. Now, in this particular case, we say that when we have this combination of Bob left when Tim had arrived. Bob left is the action that happens after. Tim arrives happened first. So first we have Tim arriving and then we have Bob leaving, which means that they did run into each other as well. Now, taking a look at the next one. Tim arrived when Mary was leaving. So this gives us the idea that the action of leaving for Mary is an action that is in progress when we are talking about the moment of Tim's arrival. So Mary is probably picking up her coat, picking up her purse, whatever it is that she has, and she's leaving. Now, the moment that she's leaving, Tim arrives, which means that they do run into each other. And then in this case, all that I'm doing here is putting a different type of emphasis on the action of Mary and leaving. Just making the point that the moment that Tim arrives, the action of leaving from the point of Mary is something that is in progress, progressively moving from the start point to the end point. So they did run into each other. Now, for the next one, we have John had left when Tim arrived. Now, what did we establish when we talk about Bob and Tim combination? That whenever you use past perfect, you're indicating the action that happened first. So the action of John leaving happens first, and then after that, I have Tim's arrival. In this particular case, that indicates to me that John and Tim did not see each other because the action of John leaving, it finishes before the action of Tim arriving. So who did not run into Tim? It was John. But before we finish things off for today, let's take a look at the final sentence. So after Tim arrived, Frank left. So in this particular case, I could also invert Frank left after Tim arrived. So in this particular case, very similar there to the idea of Jane, but just written in a slightly different way. So in this particular case, we go back into the idea that when we are communicating action, when we're using something that is perfect, we are communicating that is something finished. And if you have past perfect, we are communicating that this action finished or happened first in the chronology. So in the example, John had left when Tim arrived. In this particular case, we are saying that the action of John leaving happened first, Tim arrived after, so they did not run into each other. Now, can you create a combination of sentences like this? On our task bank, I'm going to leave some links and exercises that you can complete to help you with the understanding of past perfect versus past simple. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let's leave some sentences and some ideas in the comments, and I'll see you next time for our next quest in Second Nature English. Thank you for watching, and see you later.